All right, buckle up because today's deep dive is taking us into the heart of our devices. We're talking operating systems and software. It's like that feeling when you open up your phone and everything just works. Ever wonder about the magic happening behind the scenes?
It's easy to take it for granted,
Mhm.
right? But there's a whole hidden world in there making sure your digital life runs smoothly.
Exactly. And just like any well oiled machine, there's a system, a structure to it all. That's where the operating system, or OS, comes in. Think of it like the maestro of your digital orchestra.
I like that. It's the conductor coordinating all the different parts, the hardware, the software, the data, so they all work in harmony.
And just like a conductor needs to know which instruments to cue and when the OS is responsible for managing all those different elements. Like, remember that time your computer froze and you had to do a hard reset?
Oof, don't remind me.
I know, right? Total nightmare fuel. But guess what? The OS is there to prevent that from happening. It's constantly making sure everything is playing its part, allocating resources, and preventing conflicts. It's even responsible for booting up your device in the first place.
Absolutely. Before you even see that first splash screen, your OS is already spring into action, running checks, loading essential programs. It's the ultimate multitasker.
It really is. And here's something I find fascinating. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. We've got different types of operating systems, each tailored to a specific job. Your phone's OS is going to be different from what's running on a massive server, right?
Exactly. Think about it. Your smartphone needs an OS that's lean, efficient, and optimized for a touch interface. That's your mobile OS. Then you've got your Workstation OS, which is what you're probably using on your laptop or desktop right now. It's designed for a single user, focused on running applications smoothly and providing a user-friendly experience.
Okay, so we've got mobile and workstation covered. What about those behemoth servers we hear about, the ones holding all the data for like the entire internet?
Those bad boys run on server operating systems. They're built for heavy-duty multitasking, handling requests from potentially millions of users simultaneously. Stability, security, and the ability to manage massive amounts of data are their top priorities.
It's like the difference between a nimble sports car and a powerful 18-wheeler truck, both essential in their own right. And then you've got the often overlooked embedded OS things, smartwatches, IoT devices, even your car's infotainment system. They're designed for very specific tasks and have to be incredibly efficient within their limited resources. So we've got this whole spectrum of operating systems, each with its own specialty working tirelessly behind the scenes. But let's zoom in a bit. We've talked about the OS as the conductor, but what about the music itself? That's where file systems come into play, right?
You got it. The file system is how your computer organizes all the data on your storage devices. Think of it as the library catalog for your computer's hard drive. Without a file system, all your data would be one giant unorganized mess.
You're speaking my language. I'm all about organization. So how does it work? Our sources mention all these different types. NTFS, FET32, HFS plus. Are these like different organizational methods?
Exactly. It's like having different methods for organizing your bookshelf. You might categorize by genre, author, or even just the color of the spine.
That's a great analogy. Each file system has its own way of organizing and storing information. NTFS, for instance, is like the meticulous librarian. It's the standard for Windows, known for its security features and support for large files.
Okay, so if NTFS is the meticulous librarian, what about something like FAT32? Our sources mention that one's a bit older.
Right, FAT32 is like that well-worn card catalog. It's been around for ages and is compatible with a wide range of devices, kind of like a universal translator for different operating systems. But it does have its limitations.
Like what? Well, for one, it can't handle files larger than 4 gigabytes, which in today's world of high-resolution videos and massive games can be a real drag. It's like trying to fit a whole symphony orchestra into a phone booth.
No kidding. So choosing the right file system is important, especially if you're sharing files between devices with different operating systems.
Absolutely. It's like speaking different languages. If you're not speaking the same language, communication can break down.
You know, it's funny because I actually ran into this issue recently when I tried to use a USB drive formatted for my Mac on a friend's Windows PC. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
That's file system incompatibility in action. You probably ran into the classic NTFS versus HFS Plus dilemma. HFS Plus is the default file system for macOS, and it's got its own quirks and advantages.
So it's like each OS has its own language, its own way of keeping things in order. But it's not just about compatibility, right? Our sources mention some other cool features like compression, permissions, journaling. It sounds like a lot is happening behind the scenes.
There is. Think of these features as the unsung heroes of data management. Compression helps you squeeze more data onto your drive, like a digital Marie Kondo,
Yeah.
optimizing your storage space.
I love Marie Kondo. Everything in its place, right?
Exactly. And permissions act like security guards, controlling who has access to what files and folders. It's essential for keeping your data safe from prying eyes.
Makes sense. And what about journaling? That sounds kind of intense.
It is pretty important. Journaling is like a safety net for your data. It keeps track of changes in case of a sudden shutdown or crash. Think of it as an autosave feature for your entire hard drive.
That's amazing. So while we're busy clicking and dragging files, the file system is working tirelessly in the background, keeping everything organized, safe, and secure. We've talked about the OS as the conductor, the file system as the organizational structure, but what about the actual tools we use to interact with our devices? The software.
That's where it gets really interesting. Software is the interface between you and the complex world of operating systems and hardware. Is how we unlock the full potential of our devices.
It's like the difference between looking at a map and actually driving a car. The map gives you an overview, but the car allows you to experience the journey.
Exactly. And just like there are different types of cars for different purposes, there's a vast world of software out there, each designed to meet specific needs.
Our sources mention everything from productivity suites to web browsers to that brain-bending stuff like software deployment and architecture. Where do we even begin?
Let's start with the basics. Think about what you use your computer or smartphone for on a daily basis. Chances are you're interacting with productivity software without even realizing it.
Okay, so break it down for us. What exactly falls under the umbrella of productivity software?
When I think about it, my workday usually starts with email,
Yeah.
then maybe some writing or spreadsheet work, and of course, lots of browsing online.
You've just nailed the trifecta of productivity software. Email clients, word processors, spreadsheets. These are the digital workhorses we rely on to manage information, communicate effectively, and get things done. And let's not forget about presentation software. Think about the last time you had to give a presentation at work or school. Okay, so we've got our individual productivity covered, but what about when we need to work together? Our sources also mention collaboration software, which seems increasingly essential in our hyper-connected world.
It's become mission critical, really. Think about all the tools we use to connect and collaborate with colleagues, clients, and even friends and family across the globe. We're talking instant messaging, video conferencing, project management platforms. They all fall under the collaboration umbrella.
It's wild to think how much these tools have evolved, even in the past few years. Remember when video calls were a big deal? Now they're just part of our daily routine.
Right. And it's not just about convenience, although that's a huge part of it. These collaboration tools allow us to work together more effectively, share ideas in real time, and break down geographical barriers.
It's like we're building a giant interconnected digital brain. Okay, so we've covered productivity and collaboration software. What else is out there in the software ecosystem?
But we can't forget about the more specialized business software that keeps industries humming along. Think about things like customer relationship management systems or CRMs, which help businesses track their interactions with customers. Or accounting software, which, let's be honest, some of us rely on more than others.
I mean, no judgment here. My finances could use a little software assistance from time to time.
And then there's project management software, which helps teams stay organized and on track with the complex projects. These tools can be lifesavers when you're juggling multiple deadlines and stakeholders.
Absolutely. So we've got this whole spectrum of software, each tailored to specific needs and tasks. But here's something I've been wondering about. Our sources mention a shift towards cloud-based software. And I'm not going to lie, the cloud still feels a bit mysterious to me.
It's a great question, and it's something that's revolutionizing how we access and use software. Think of it this way. Traditionally, software lived on your physical device, right? You installed it on your computer, and that was that. With cloud-based software, the heavy lifting happens on remote servers, and you access it over the internet.
So instead of installing a program on my computer, I'm essentially accessing it over the web.
Exactly. It's like the difference between owning a car and using a ride-sharing service. You still get where you need to go, but you don't have to worry about maintenance, storage, or any of the other headaches of ownership.
That makes sense. So what are the benefits of using cloud-based software, besides the whole not having to worry about maintenance thing, which, let's be real, is already a huge plus?
There are actually a ton of benefits. For starters, cloud-based software is typically more accessible. You can access your files and programs from anywhere with an internet connection. No more being chained to your desk.
That's a game changer, especially for remote work or if you're on the go a lot.
And because your data is stored in the cloud, you have that built-in redundancy we talked about earlier. Even if your device crashes and burns, your data is safe and sound on those remote servers.
Mm.
No more late-night data recovery freakouts.
Okay, that alone might be worth the price of admission. But what about things like privacy and security when you're entrusting your data to the cloud?
That's a valid concern. And it's important to choose reputable cloud providers with robust security measures in place. Think of it like choosing a secure bank to store your money. You want to make sure they have top-notch security systems and protocols.
Makes sense. So it sounds like cloud-based software is rapidly changing the game, and there are clear advantages to making the switch. But our sources also delve into some of the more technical aspects of software, like deployment and architecture. Are those rabbit holes we need to go down?
Well, understanding these concepts can give you a deeper appreciation for the complexity of software development. Software deployment, for instance, is all about how software gets from the hands of developers into the hands of users like you and me. It involves things like installation, configuration, and updates.
Ah, so that's why we're constantly bombarded with software updates.
Exactly. And software architecture is like the blueprint for a program. It defines how different components interact with each other, how data is structured, and how the software functions as a whole.
It's like the difference between seeing a finished building and understanding the architectural plans that made it possible.
Precisely. And just like with architecture, there are different approaches to software architecture, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Fascinating. So we've got the OS managing everything behind the scenes, file systems keeping our data organized, and this vast world of software that allows us to interact with our devices in meaningful ways. But before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, software licensing. It seems like there's a lot of variation in how we're allowed to use and share software.
There is. Software licensing is all about the legal agreements that govern how software can be used, distributed, and modified. Think of it like the rules of the road for software.
So what are some of the different types of licenses we might encounter?
Well, you've got your single-use licenses, which are pretty self-explanatory. You buy a copy of the software and you're allowed to install it on one device. Then you have group licenses, which are often used by businesses or organizations to provide access to software for multiple users.
Right, like those software packages you often see in office settings.
Exactly. And then you have concurrent licenses, which limit the number of people who can use the software at the same time. It's like a digital timeshare for software.
So if a company has a concurrent license for, say, 10 users, only 10 people can be logged in and using the software at any given time?
That's right. It's a way for software companies to control access and ensure that their products are being used within the terms of the license agreement.
Makes sense. And we can't forget about the great debate, open source versus proprietary software. Our sources highlight the philosophical and practical differences between these two approaches.
It's a fascinating topic. Open source software, as the name suggests, makes its source code publicly available, allowing anyone to view, modify, and distribute it. It's all about transparency, collaboration, and the free exchange of ideas.
It's like sharing the recipe for your famous cookies with the world. Anyone can bake them, tweak the ingredients, even create their own variations.
Exactly. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have proprietary software, where the source code is kept secret by the company that developed it. It's a more controlled approach, allowing companies to protect their intellectual property and dictate the terms of use.
So it's like keeping your secret cookie recipe locked away in a vault. You control the distribution, the modifications, everything.
That's a great way to put it. Both approaches have their pros and cons. Open source software often fosters innovation and community involvement, while proprietary software allows companies to control the user experience and generate revenue from their products.
It's a balancing act for sure. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the inner workings of operating systems to the vast world of software and its impact on our lives. It's been enlightening.
It really has.
Yeah.
And it underscores how crucial it is to be mindful of this hidden world that powers so much of what we do.
Absolutely. A huge thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of operating systems and software. Until next time, stay curious.